Hello, hello. Hey guys, welcome to Grace Through Pain, a journey to hope. I am a little nervous, but very excited about this one because my guest today is my sister, Dr. Alisha Joy Hines. This is going to be interesting because we are kind of freestyling it and I don't know what she's going to say, but it's my little sister. It's just the two of us. And I get so many, messages and questions. And I have a mixed bag of followers from supporters and folks that just like love me, as well as those of us that are living with a chronic illness, MS specifically. And I think that it's really helpful and needed for our friends and family to know how they can show up for us, as well as it's helpful for us to know how we can help them help us. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I can't wait for you guys to meet my little sister. And she's still 10 in my head, but no, she's a grown woman. So it's going to be, I don't know. All right, I'm stalling. All right, I'm going to bring her in. One sec. Alisha Joy. Hi, sister.
Hi, friends. Hi, MH Squad.
We're here. I was saying before I brought you in, I was like, I don't know how this is going to go, but let's just go ahead and go.
Neither do I. So we shall see.
So just a reminder, this is my younger sister, my little sister, Dr. Alisha Joy Hines, who also lives in Los Angeles. She has drank the Kool-Aid and is living the North Hollywood life.
Yes, I am. And finding my own way through LA that isn't West Hollywood.
I know. It's so funny.
More radius that you stated.
We've got very different experiences, in terms of our entry into Los Angeles. I was there during the SUR days and lived it up. And so whenever I come to visit, I'm always like, oh, this is a very different type of Los Angeles, Alisha.
Very different experience.
So, but we're here. Hines Girls taking over LA. So I'd said, Alisha, that before diving into this, that I've had so many questions on both sides of the fence, from folks that are living with MS, not knowing how to communicate with their loved ones, to loved ones reaching out to me saying that they don't know how to communicate with their loved one that is living with MS. So I feel like there's a lot that we can kind of cover and go into. And again, these are just our opinions, our experiences, but I figured, who better than my family, my sister to kind of come on and talk to you guys just about, her experience. So, but before we go there, I think it's important to talk about just our relationship in general, very lightly, but there's so many different types of relationships, and I love all of the memes and the Instagram things about, older sisters or younger sisters, or just the sister dynamic of sister fights and, stealing of clothes. But then again, it's over, it's fine. And it's like it never happened. And I think that so much of that is the story of our sisterhood. But just wanted, from your perspective, what would you kind of categorize, or how would you describe our relationship, before I got sick?
Yeah, I think I agree. It's all the memes and the access we have now to people talking about their sister relationships is really funny to me and makes me very happy to know that we're not the only ones who have the dynamic that we have. And I think before you got sick, this is a good question. Before you got sick, we knew and recognized like how different we were, I think, like from a very young age. So we had very different interests and different personalities. But you were always this huge like force and presence in my life because of, just by virtue of who you are. Um, and it shaped my like experiences growing up because you've always kind of like exposed me to things and always kind of projected your like dream and imagination onto me. So,
Yes,
and for
forcing you
better
to
or
be in
worse,
plays, forcing you to
exactly, for better or worse, like making me, perform in front of people when, especially when I was that age, like I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to do anything, like let
yeah.
alone be able to like in my anxiety, I like trying to remember these lines and, perform in front of our family. But then I remember like the babysitters club and like, you would
Oh
have
my
me.
gosh, yes.
Yes.
Our kid
You
kit.
you would have us riding horses and making like paper mache balloons because like different activities that I probably would never have done, or been exposed to, but just little stuff like that. And just always like knowing that you were around, you always had my back, no matter what was going on. I definitely felt like I could like trust you and I could depend on you, or like, I could expect you to kind of be there for me, because you did take that kind of responsibility for me growing up, whether you wanted to or not. You did. um, and then I think as we got older, you were, you were off pursuing your dreams, as I was kind of shaping my own and shaping my own sense of what I wanted out of my life and who I wanted to be and where I wanted to be and what kind of young woman, I was becoming. And so, but I always had that, example in you, like whether I wanted to emulate it or do something differently or, be like you or not. I always had this example of someone, as a big sister who was just doing their thing and like pursuing going after what they wanted and creating a life, of their dreams. And so even if it was from a distance, that was always a gift and kind of like a blessing for me to have. And then also knowing that you would always be there, if I needed you. So, and I think, and we'll probably talk more about this, but I think that since, the diagnosis, our relationship has become like more vulnerable. Like I think in our family growing up,
Hmm.
none of us are we didn't grow up in a very vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable family, as close
Right.
as we all are. It was
Hmm.
like we didn't have really deep conversations and like get to know that like inner life and like inner existence of the people in our family. So yeah, even as close as we were, there was still some distance.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was, I mean, and I'm not wanting to speak for you, but I do feel like there was a period in our lives where there was a kind of a dual, a reciprocated resentment that,
Mhm.
was there. I think that, for, on my end, there was just so much responsibility that was put on me as an oldest sibling that instead of putting it on our parents and saying like, this isn't something that I should have to be in charge of, the resentment kind of went more to you as, you're the reason, that this individual, this sister is why I have this pressure, or this stress, or, I mean, it was a great trip, but it was just so funny when we went to Cuba, the conversations that our parents had with me about what my responsibility was. And, if anything happened to you or didn't go smoothly for you, that it kind of shadowed my experience because of what was being kind of said to me as, like the oldest. But I think that you also were experiencing a lot of resentment because of how much space I took up and how much just taking all of that air. I mean, I'll let you speak to it, but I feel like you also had some resentment,
Mhm.
on that side. Did you feel like you did, or am I
Yeah, and I don't
projecting?
know. Yeah, I would say definitely yes. Um, and I think you naming that you took up a lot of space is helpful, because that's for better or worse, that's just who you are. You're a force of nature. You're like a huge person, a huge personality. Um, and I think sometimes the resentment came from like me not feeling like seen. Like I didn't feel like anyone really knew me or like understood me or cared to or like cared to take the time. And and I felt that way um with like you and mom, and like I felt very close to dad because I felt like I could kind of be myself with him, and I could
Hmm.
um, be open and talk about things. And he sort of saw what I was interested in, and he didn't really require much of me. And so I think that was like, that's the dual part, is like one, not being seen, but then also feeling like there is an expectation on me to behave a certain way or show up a certain way. And I'm like, nobody even cares, like about
Yeah.
what I have going on internally
Hmm.
or like in my personal life. And I think that's where the resentment came from. And then it also kind of back to our parents. I do now have like a better sense of their role in the complications, or challenges in our relationship, and how they could have done better to nurture our relationship as sisters, as opposed to like, just saying that you're obligated to do something, for me or make sure that I'm okay.
Right.
But
Hmm.
yeah, and so yeah, and some of their perspectives on you, or their perspectives on different situations that were happening that I wasn't really privy to, because you and I weren't talking about them. And, we didn't have that vulnerability and that communication in our relationship. And so then I'm just hearing kind of like their perspective on what's
Right.
happening, and that's shaping my view on what's going on, and, adding to whatever resentment or negative feelings that I had. So they played a
Yeah.
big
I
role.
mean, that's a whole nother episode about boomers parenting. And just, they didn't know what they didn't know, and they were just doing what they were told, of how they were raised. And so I think that, millennials and, Gen X, we're shifting that now. I think, at least for my friends that have kids, I'm seeing that, we're talking about our feelings, and, we're not just moving through them. So, I mean, we're all a product of that, I think. But I think that it kind of goes into, now with me being diagnosed, it's interesting that I'm still kind of taking up a lot of space, like regardless of, because MS is so big and it's so much. And so it's like, okay, here we are again, kind of filling the room. And so, most of you guys know my diagnosis story, so I'm not going to get too, into it, but we were all on family vacation in Martha's Vineyard, and had exercised, had a good morning, and I had gone upstairs to get dressed, and that's when I had my first kind of large MS kind of flare up attack, where crazy pain, went paralyzed. But my sister Alicia, you were there and could hear me. You were the first person to hear what was going on, because I think our mom was outside or doing something on the porch. And so I just wanted to, not to trigger you or traumatize you any more than that experience, just kind of hear from you what that morning, kind of looked like for you, especially because you did not go with us to the hospital. You wound up having to stay behind. And so just kind of what was going through your mind in the moment, and then when my mom and I left in the ambulance.
Well, I did go. So,
Oh, okay. Thank you.
yeah. So I think, yeah, a couple of things. I mean, there are a few traumatic moments. That first moment, it took me a while to kind of wrap my head around, and some therapy to like deal with that. Just one, understanding like how traumatic that experience was. And I think it's connected to what we've been talking about before, in terms of like how big of a person you are, and how strong you've always been, and how, this is going to make me probably a little bit emotional, but sorry if my voice shakes. But I remember being downstairs in the house, and you were upstairs. Like you said, we had a nice morning. I was working, I think, on my computer, and mom was outside having like her coffee on the patio. and I just heard you calling mom's name. Like you were just saying like mom, like you wanted her. But there was, and like you said, I think you called her name like twice. And I was like, okay, mom's outside. I'm like, I'll finish this sentence and go get mom and tell her, Martinique's calling her. But then you kept
Yeah.
calling, and there was like something in your voice was just different. Like it was something I had never, there was like a tone in your voice that I had never really heard before.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, like something's going on. And then from there, like I don't really know why like I made the set of choices that I made, but like at that point I decided not to go outside and get mom. And I was like, you just need to go upstairs, like, and see. Either I needed
Okay.
to see what was going on upstairs first, or like it was just like very immediate, like something. I was like, you need to just go upstairs. And so, yeah, this is the hard part. So, and then I came upstairs, and you were like crawling off the bed, like reaching out to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's okay, Alisha.
um, So again, had never heard your voice that way, had never seen you in that kind of just like physical position, like crawling
Yeah.
out and reaching out to me. Like I had just never seen you in that position before. And then all of a sudden you just started saying like, I don't want to die. Like I'm not ready to die.
Yeah.
And I didn't really even know like what you were feeling or what was going on, but she just kept saying like, I don't want to die. So I'm like, you're not going to die. Like everything's okay. And then then you said, I can't feel my legs. I can't move my arm, that kind of thing. And so then that was when I was like, okay, let me go and get mom and call
Mm-hmm.
911, and kind of spring into action. And so then, yeah, mom came up, but then, yeah, so you all went in the ambulance, and I drove the car
Yeah, that's
behind
right.
you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mom was like screaming at me. I almost like got into a fight with mom because I wasn't like, you're not supposed to like follow directly behind. But I was going through the lights and like everything with
Yeah.
the ambulance. And I
Okay.
guess she was trying to call me, but I wasn't looking at my phone. And she's like, that's so dangerous. You weren't supposed to do it. And I'm like, mom, like, get out of my face. But then from there, you all had got, you went to, when you went to Boston is when I went back to the house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so much is a blur for me. If I retell the story, it's
Yeah.
the pain, the paralysis, and then a little bit of the ER, and then being medvac to Boston. It's very blurry, and I don't even remember
Mm-hmm.
getting into the ambulance. Like I don't recall how that even happened. So it's a lot just for me to even hear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so that, yeah, it's a lot. But I remember that day, like, yeah, I remember them coming into the room, like, I have a really bad memory, so it's like certain things, like, I don't remember at all. But that day and that moment, I remember like super, super vividly, and I also remember us thinking like us trying to like rationalize it already, like I remember in my mind I was like, oh, she probably had a stroke because I had a friend of mine, their husband had a stroke a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He's in his 30s. And we're always saying you're too busy and you fly too much and you do too much, you need to rest more. And so that
Yeah.
was kind of like, and then by the time we had gotten to the hospital, it seemed like you were okay,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
so it felt like this is just an episode, and this is something that's going to be like over and dealt with pretty quickly. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think we all did. I think by the time I was at Brigham and Women's, I had feeling again. It was shaky, but I had feeling again. And I was kind of like, okay, do you think we can get back on a ferry
mm-hmm.
at this vineyard tonight? And like,
Making
I'll wear
plans for you.
compression socks, and, I'll go to the doctor in LA and it's stress or it's, whatever. And so obviously that was not the case. And I got admitted and, like life changed. And so I think that we all were, in that denial. And so that's kind of what I know I was in denial. I know that I felt okay, enough where it was just like, can this really be it? And so it took me, a few months before I acknowledged, that I really even had this, right? And got on treatment, et cetera. Did you experience denial or did you accept it? off the gate, or just that initial kind of beginning period of it all?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I don't know if it was denial. It was that I didn't really understand the severity of it and the gravity of it, I guess. Like,
Hmm. Yeah.
so like it was, even if you had this diagnosis, it still took a while for me to realize how serious
Oh,
it
we never
was.
had anyone that had
Yeah.
it. I didn't know anything at all about it. I knew it existed, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And what you hear about it, it's like, there's so many different types, and so things like that, I had no idea. So someone may have it but not have the symptoms that you had, or not
Hmm.
experience what you were experiencing. And so it took a long time for you to have symptoms, be going and seeing your neurologist and figuring out what was going on. So it was like it was just a constant like state of process. It was like new information. Okay, now I have to process this,
Yeah.
and like, and I think we're still in that, but yeah, that took a while. And I wouldn't say denial. I would say it was more like fear. That's like definitely what I felt in the first like year. Sorry, that still obviously makes me emotional.
Mhm.
But because the when it happened, it was the summer before I started teaching, before I started my new job at Wake Forest. And so I just remember like being in my office and just being like so afraid of everything, like afraid that something was going to happen to you, or something was going to happen to mom or dad. It was just like it
Yeah.
was a spiral of like catastrophizing,
Hmm.
because as every bit of information we got that was new was like almost worse than what had come
Yeah.
before, and it's
Hmm.
just like it wasn't getting better. And so like that, that started to weigh on me a lot in like the first year or two.
Yeah. I mean, it was a traumatic kind of start into MS. I say a lot of people have been sick for a long time and had symptoms, and so by the time they got diagnosed, there was that relief because they
Mhm.
had answers finally for why they weren't feeling well. But that just wasn't the case for
Mhm.
me. It seemed like I was perfectly healthy.
Mhm.
And then I think it was less than a year later, it was brain surgery, and so it just was a very like traumatic entree into like this world
Mhm.
for everyone. And I know that I think in general, you mentioned it, our family, we're very autonomous. We are fine by ourselves. Like it's we're really fine by ourselves. And I'm more extroverted than you,
Mhm.
but also just fine by myself, and appreciate that. And so I think that the isolation, the self isolation, that I put myself in, one, because this existence is isolating as it is, not being able to truly get people to understand living life with pain. It's
Yeah.
just not something that you can get. There's just no way to explain it for someone to truly understand it. I don't, your brain can't comprehend it.
Mhm.
So you already are feeling not heard, not seen. So it's already isolating. And so if you're someone that kind of is okay by yourself, you can go more into yourself because
Right.
that's a safer kind of like space. And so I wanted to just hear from you. Do you feel like there's things that you wish in a perfect world that I did for our family to help you all help me more? Because I don't, I always want to say this, and this is really for those living with MS. I don't think that it's our responsibility to make our friends and family, feel better about what's happening. That's not something that I think we have to carry. I say a lot that, especially to my mom, who's very emotional, like most mothers are, that like you have to kind of find somewhere else
Yeah.
to take that. Like the breakdowns, and she did really great on my brain surgery, walking me down that hall. She
Mhm.
really kept it together and was strong for me, and had her meltdown or breakdown after I was already in the operating room, because I can't hold that, so if it's calling her other daughter, if it's calling, her friends, so I want to be clear that I don't think that's something that those of us living with this disease have to take that responsibility or hold space for. But I do think that there are things that we can do to help our loved ones help us, and I know that we're at a loss sometimes. And so I'd love to hear, from you, if you were like, man, if there was a way that Martinique could, share it this way, or, or things that you've seen I've done that you're like, I'm really glad you're doing that now. You weren't doing it before. I'd love to hear that. I know that so many of us would love to hear just your thoughts and our opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that I think we've learned over the past like 5 or so years, and things that have been implemented. And so there's a couple layers to what you were saying. The first, I think, is the emotional reaction and response is something that me personally is and continues to be kind of really difficult, because of my personality, I'm very introverted. I kind of deal with my emotions like very personally, and then we also in our family don't have a lot of like space for big emotions that are not like anger, or that are not like just
Yeah.
rage, like but like actually just holding space for someone who's in a really emotional moment, or like crying together, like that kind of stuff isn't stuff we're really versed and practiced in.
Yeah.
And so, and then at the same time, I know that it's not helpful for you in any case, like before or after you were sick, to have someone like crying and try, like being so completely downtrodden and unable to manage their emotions. Like I know that that's something that you don't, in any case, like you can't really
Right.
deal with, you don't want to deal
Correct.
with. So, you're like, pull it together, like,
Right.
so that's been something that's been interesting for me to navigate, because I don't ever or never would have wanted you to feel like I wasn't feeling these emotions, and I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't having, very like serious, hard, difficult times as I was processing this, because of my love for you as my sister. But then also like not really knowing when and how is it appropriate to like share that, and like, and then sometimes not reacting in a moment like mom, because mom's going to be so emotional, and it's
Yeah.
like, and I have to keep it together, but then I have my own personal private moments where it really has come out and manifested in that way. And then also with me, like the panic attacks, like that was 100% like related. I had so many panic attacks in that first year after you were diagnosed, and that's my own like emotional regulation kind of piece
Mm-hmm.
that I need to
Mm-hmm.
work on. But then in addition to that, like the positive things that I think have come in the way that you sort of helped us manage it was, for example, you sending like almost like trigger warning texts of like,
Yeah.
and then like like sending us messages with like really detailed information when you felt ready, as opposed to like, I went to the doctor. This is what happened. I got this, information, and like, let me share this with you. And I think that was really smart and helpful for me and mom. And I'm sure your friends too, to just get that information. Cause then I can go like research, I can look it up,
Yeah.
like the
Mm-hmm.
trigeminal neuralgia. Like I was learning about that. It was like, okay, this is something that I can like do something about, at least in my own, you know, life. And then that equips me to have something meaningful to say, or something that makes sense to you, or something that, isn't completely off base and sounds ridiculous, because that's a big, I think, challenge for people, who are family members of people with MS, is like, you don't really know what to say. Like, you don't
Yeah.
know how to like make it, you can't make it better. So you feel very helpless in your
Mm-hmm.
actions and your language and and everything. And so being able to have something to work with and like help me work through that a little bit better was really great. Um,
Well, it means a lot, I think, when I was saying how there's so much that you don't feel seen or heard, to have a conversation with someone you care about and have them acknowledge or mention something that shows that they did some research, like if we're talking, you're like, well, so is your pain like this? Or, XYZ, it just feels good to know, like, oh, wow, okay, so read something or you looked something up and you have some idea, even if my pain isn't that, or symptom isn't whatever it is, it's still okay. This person was trying to understand it.
Right.
And so I think that for me at least goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you that are listening that are looking for what you can kind of do for your loved ones, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's huge.
Yeah, definitely. And then, just and if what we would ask for or could ask for is just the patience and the grace as much as you have for us as we are figuring out, how to navigate these things and have those conversations and show up in the way that, we can. Because I know that it's your experience. Like there's, I can't carry it for you. I can't take it from you. I can't make it better. So the patience and the grace with us as we figure out, how to be there for you in the best way that we can is really helpful.
Yeah, and I do want to say that as much as this is my experience or someone that's living with them as their experience, this has still changed your life forever. This has still changed our mother's life forever. This has changed, everyone who cares about me's life. And so, as much as it has altered mine, it has altered yours. And so, I think that it's hard because I'm almost double talking because I'm like, you don't have to hold space for, but if we're talking about, these are all people that we love, and so if I love you, I love my mom, I love, my friends, I love dad. There's not a world where I'm not going to consider how this is affecting you,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that it's just a really, kind of tough line that we're on both sides of. And so, what do you feel like in terms of how your life has changed or been altered for good or bad,
Mm-hmm.
um, 5 years later? What has the effects of this, just kind of like high level, do you think, how has this altered, Alicia's world?
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think mostly about the ways it's altered my life in good ways, I think. Or at least I try to think of it that way because like obviously the negative, the bad is there, but trying to focus on what I hate to say positive. I know there's like, it's difficult to say like this is a good thing or there's any purpose in it,
Right,
whatever. But I
right.
do think like certain things have come out of it that are have been beneficial to me. I like personal development and growth. So, for example, like I quit my job essentially because like of your diagnosis, and
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
hard thing I think to like wrap your head around if you're not me. It's like my own personal algorithm, but it was like I realized that it's like if somebody gets pregnant or somebody like, you realize you have to like show up for something and so then you have to change, like you have to do something differently.
Mhm.
And I was in a place where I realized I was so depressed and I was so repressed and so like unregulated that I was
Yeah.
like, I will not be able to function in my family like if with this situation happening if I don't do something different with my life so that I can be stronger and happier and
Mhm.
more emotionally stable. And so that definitely like led me, plus the pandemic, whatever, everything else, but like that was definitely a cataclysmic like moment for me to
Yeah.
change my life. And I also think that it has shaped or reframed our relationship in a lot of positive ways. Like it has
Definitely,
made
yeah.
us, I think, a lot softer to each other and more communicative, more vulnerable, all those things we didn't really have growing up. And as hard as it is, I think we're starting to see each other better, see each other more, like just for who we are, and communicate through different challenges. And that's not something that I think we would have done, but we could have gone forever kind of in the dynamic that we
Yeah.
had.
So many
Because
people do, right? I mean, definitely.
like you said, we're good by ourselves. Like we're just kind of like I'm doing my thing, you're doing yours. So this has definitely improved, I think, our relationship And obviously it's terrible and shitty that this is why, but I'm very, very grateful for that.
No, yeah. I mean, I think that I have so much gratitude. You know, I always say, well, Christina Applegate just recently said that this is the worst thing that's ever happened in her life. And
Mm-hmm.
it 1,000% that is correct. You know, there is no question. This is the worst thing that has ever happened to me in my entire life. But it's so weird that you can say that, and that is fact, true. Nothing's gonna, nothing has topped this to date. Hopefully, nothing will. But then there's this but of I am. I know I'm a better person. I
Mm-hmm.
know, like you said, the softness. I'm more empathetic. I show more grace. I give more grace. I'm more intentional. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think you and I just had a conversation over Christmas where I was like, it was over a disagreement that we'd had, not even a disagreement, more of a miscommunication. And I said, well, there's just not a world where I'm going to be having a fight with you. I
Mm-hmm.
said, that's just not, that's not going to be a thing
Mm-hmm.
because you're my sister. I don't know what's happening to me. And that's not going to be something, that's something I can control. So it's like, I will disengage and just tell you, cool. And literally move on because it's like, well, I'm not doing that. It's so if and I think that that intent and that awareness
Mm-hmm.
that, none of us, tomorrow isn't promised for any of us. Today isn't promised. I could die from MS. I could die stepping out to my car, and like there's just 1,000 different ways that we can go. But I think the awareness that MS gives you of our mortality,
Yeah.
um, if you choose, and it's a choice to use it for the good, you can take that awareness and not go into the depths, but
Mm-hmm.
actually just find the joy, find those good moments and look for them and stay in them. And so it's just a weird mixed bag of feelings when it comes to the reflections of what this life altering event has done.
Yeah.
So it's interesting for you to say pretty much kind of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
um, what would you say, and this will kind of be how we kind of wrap up, what would you say to folks that are listening that have someone in their life that is newly diagnosed? Like, if you could go back, to 2018, knowing kind of what you know now, things that you would have either done or shown up, or, just how you would have managed or handled, or just internally processing it.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many folks that listen that are new to this community in this world, and they have so many questions. They're terrified, they're
Mm-hmm.
scared. I know if this podcast could have been here for me or for you to be able to listen to, it would have done wonders. So I'm always asking and just kind of wondering if you could go back and impart some wisdom, what would that be?
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, and I hope we can do this like again, like maybe like five years down, like a
Right.
anniversary,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm sure that I'll have more thoughts and a better advice and all those things. But I think therapy was really helpful for me in the beginning. Um, and because there are so few people who understand, like, for you what you're going through, and then there are so few people who understand what I'm going through, like in my
Yeah.
life,
Right.
and people want to be helpful and they want to show up for you as your friends and your loved ones, but you can't even like articulate. Like, I remember sometimes people would be like, how's Marty doing? And I'm like, I don't even know what to say to
Yeah.
you, like, I really don't even know how to approach that. And I know you're just coming from a place of like, I want to check in and like, I'm your friend, but I really don't even know what to say. So therapy, I think, helped me give some language to some of the things that I was feeling, and like recognize some of the emotions, and then also forced me to like process old trauma and like repressed emotions, because you really just have to be mentally and emotionally and spiritually strong, I think, to deal with this. So whatever that looks like for you,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like for me, my exercise routine and like, just the certain things that I do really help me to keep myself together, because that's what the person needs from you more than anything, is like to just be okay. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
try to
Yeah.
be in the best position that you can be. And so that, you know, when you are tapped in and you are called upon, like you can show up in the best way, because they can't take care of you, you know, in the same way. um and communication, like making space for just like open communication, I think is has been really important for us. Like just having time where we can, like we've had so many in the past, you know, couple of years, like just hour long, 2 hour long, just like chats, you know, when we're
Yeah.
together, kind of
Hmm.
going through, you know, whatever topic, you know, that comes to mind, and like just
Yeah.
creating that space for that and being open to that, and showing up like ready to engage in that and dive in, I think is really helpful. And then, you know, learning what you can, learning as much as you can, and being careful about, you still do have to be very careful, you know, about how you say things and how you approach things, and like be more aware of yourself. And so it is a
Hmm.
responsibility on you to take that time, if you really want to show up and support that person in a way that will be meaningful to them.
Yeah, I think those are really good. I mean, I think what you hit on was no one really knowing how to support you, you know, in terms of your friends. And I think that it's not comparing illnesses by any means, but when you are dealing with something chronic that
Yeah.
there is no cure for, it's hard to share updates because it doesn't, it's not the regular course, you know, either, you know, typically if you're sick, it either ends, and you don't get better, and that's the end of that, or you do get better, and we're cheering for that. And there's this kind of progress versus, with chronic diseases, there just isn't that update. There's not a cheering update. The most that we can say is, I always say to people, like, I hope that you are closer to your baseline, because it's like
Hmm.
you're never going to be good. But
Hmm.
it's like, if I'm just praying whatever your baseline is, that you can get there and hold that, because
Hmm.
that at least you can manage and move within, versus the roller coaster, that I think is what is also so traumatic.
Hmm.
And so I think that remembering that this is something that's chronic, that, until the Lord decides it's a forever experience that we, now are in.
Hmm.
And as we've said, and the whole title of this podcast is just giving ourselves that grace, because this is a whole new world that so many people don't know how to address us or engage with us, and we barely know how to engage. And
Yeah.
so it's just kind of knowing that and not getting frustrated with ourselves or with others.
And
And
I want to say too, I think what you're doing is so important because, and I don't know, this may feel like you're just reiterating what you're saying, but people really don't grasp like the idea of a chronic illness. Like regular people, if you don't have that personal experience, like
Mhm.
you really don't get it, and it's very hard to wrap your head around. Like the idea that you continue to do everything that you do in your work and in your personal life, and you know how you are still pursuing your dreams and still living the life that you want, and are at the same time like
Yeah,
simultaneously dealing with this chronic illness that doesn't, you know, isn't right now getting better, is like it's people's brains just glitch.
yeah.
And so, and that comes out in a lot of different ways. It can be
Hmm.
like judgment, it can be like, oh, you know, she's, it's not that bad, it can be, you know, oh, she must be doing better. And so like having these conversations out loud, and giving people that insight into that is really, really powerful, I think, because even me, it's like I just didn't understand it, you know, and it's still something you have to like manage in your head and in your
Yeah.
emotions on a regular basis as you see someone living this life, you know, in
Hmm.
front of you.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's hard, because I think, there's something where people say, like, you don't see me on my worst days.
Yeah.
That's not something that we're advertising, right? You only see the good or the better days. And, you know, I'm still battling with that, in terms of what you share and what you don't, because typically if it's a bad day, you're not really sharing because you're very sick. So you're not publicizing that during the time. So it's hard. And I think all of that, the hardness of it all is, again, why we have to just continue to be kind and be patient with ourselves. So thank you, sister.
Thanks for having me. Thanks. This was fun.
We did it.
I'm a little nervous, but we made it through. All you have to bring me back, and I'll be a little bit better.
I know. We got your microphone now. You know that the headphones go away. We're podcasters.
We're podcasters. We're doing it. My pink microphone.
We're doing it.
Yeah.
But no, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you, Alisha, for joining us today. And I hope that you guys can give yourself some grace this week. Until next time.
Love that. Love you, sister. Bye.
Love you. Bye, guys.